Hey, welcome back to my channel, everyone. For this week's video, I collected a lot of Dark Elf, Dread Elf army lists, and I'll be going through them and discuss them shortly. Also, with my experience as a playtester, it might give some more insights. So I have about 10 lists, and I find that they follow kind of the same directions, but there's some very important differences between them. So I'll just talk about the lists a bit. So the first list has a Dread Prince on a Raptor. He's going to go in a unit of 10 Dread Knights. And then for the rest, you have a Warlock Outcast and a Temple Legate to provide you with magic, and some core to fill out the core. This is still a bit of a MSU type list where you have just one big block of knights and then a couple of smaller units. You'll see in a lot of lists that people take a Warlock Outcast and Temple Legate. I also played with double Temple Legate and double Temple Legate with a Wizard Conclave, and that is also possible, but the type of spells that you get are really different from having a Warlock Outcast. And also the Warlock Outcast, the value of the Warlock Outcast is that it allows you to get that one spell through that you really want to get through. Because the sacrifice for your opponent is just too great. So in Cosmology, there is a couple of spells that could be interesting. For example, Perception of Strength. I think that is one of the most important spells in Cosmology. Probably this person wants to get it through either on the knights or against the knights, on the unit fighting the knights. Yeah, I think this army design of having one beefed up fighter unit supported by a lot of smaller units has been seen before. I don't think the Dread Knights are the proper pick here. I would just keep them cheap, not include a prince in them, not even give them standard musician champion or the Eye of Gorgon, just 10 Dread Knights with great weapons. Because it is a really risky pick. They only have resilience 3, they only have a 2-up armor save, 3-up armor save in combat. So if your opponent brings something that can deal with them easily, then you're in for a lot of pain. To complement them, this person has some repeater batteries. Which is quite important in this list because then you can trigger Scent of Blood more easily, which is to mean that if you deal damage to an opponent already some units before in the game, you get an extra inch on your charge move. And also the repeater batteries in this list, you don't really crowd up your own board space, so they will be able to shoot more effectively. And these are things that I like in the list. What I don't like is that he only has one big combat block, and he cannot get charged with anything in the list really. He doesn't have a lot of very powerful units other than the Dread Knights, so it's probably going to be rather easy to also get into his backlines and remove the batteries and also get flank charges on some of the small units in this way. Okay, next list. As you can see, this list follows kind of the same design as the previous list in the sense that it has a lot of small and medium-sized units backed up by some support, but yeah, it's different in the way that it moves. So the previous list had 2 Raptor Chariots and a unit of Knights. This list has one big unit of Acolytes, which is not to be disregarded, but it also features one big unit of Obsidian Guard. You can see that it doesn't have a BSB, but instead this is compensated by the fact of having 3 units of Obsidian Guard that also give rerolls on your panic tests. So the break tests in Dread Elves, usually you're focused on fighting the first round of combat really well, and if you don't, then you'd rather get out even than stick around because of the +1 wound in the first round of combat. So it is interesting to not have a BSB and just cover your panic checks with Obsidian Guard. And the units of 10 Obsidian Guard, they are really good. I haven't decided yet whether I want to play them 5 wide or 3 wide. 3 wide would just be for chaff cleaning and having a bit more flank protection on the units themselves. 5 wide offers you more combat potential to the front, but then again, if you get flanked, you only get 4 attacks. So I am still going to try out the 3 wide. Maybe that's also why this person put musicians on them to move around easier. This list also has repeater auxiliaries in core together with Dread Legionnaires and a lot of Obsidian Guard, and these are all academy trained units, which means that if they are within 8 inches of each other, the enemy counts as having 1 less rank for the purposes of steadfast and disrupted, and you count as you give the enemy a -1 on the rank bonus, if applicable, for every academy trained unit in combat. And you also get a +1 on your charge advance. In addition, the repeater auxiliaries have a special rule that they can give a suppressing volley, so that gives them -1 to hit in the first round of combat, I believe, on units against academy trained units. So the repeater auxiliaries, they have to do this, then another unit charges in, and then the enemy has -1 to hit on that unit. Yeah, so the raiding party that's there to just house the Warlock Outcast because they have light troops, and Beastbreaker upgrade is quite nice here because that allows you to get hatred on a harnessed model part of a unit within 8 inches on the charge. In this list, it's only the Warlock Acolytes that have any mounts, and even then the horses are not that interesting. So yeah, I think they're mostly there for the light troops. You could take Corsairs, but they count against your radar limit, and this person already has 2 units of repeater auxiliaries and 2 units of black cloak, so you only have 100 points left to spare. Because this cap is only 900 points, so the shooting is devastating in Dread Elves, but it is also highly capped. So a very offensive shooting list is not going to be that possible. I like the list in the sense that it has a lot of small units that the opponent has to keep in mind, and I really like in this list to have 2 silent assassins, making all of these units all the way more threatening and powerful. In addition, you can see that this list does not feature a Temple Legate. Instead, it has the Warlock Acolyte Champion, and it has the Effigy of Dread. This gives channel 3 to the army, the Effigy. So in total, this list is on channel 5, which is incredible. The Warlock Outcast, however, is on Witchcraft, so that is not a too offensive lore. Yet it is threatening enough in ways that really support this type of army. I think this is a really interesting list to see on the table. It's a really difficult list to play with because all of the little units, they do have their own purpose, and if they do manage to do what they want to do, then the list really comes together as a whole. If they don't, then everything will collapse in one giant mess. The last thing I can point out is the Legion Legate has quite a lot of upgrades. I would just keep him a bit more simple than this, because he only starts with 3 attacks with offensive 6. You don't need to get him to 5 attacks with strength 5 AP3, because the amount of effort you put into it, giving him the Seal of the Republic, giving him the Hero's Heart and the Ring of the Ninth Legion, that's over 100 points that you can better spend on just another chaff unit maybe. Then we have list number 3. So this list is a bit different from the other 2 in the sense that he bumped up the Dread Legionnaires to 20 men. He also still once again has a big combat block. This time it's Judicators. The Academy banner makes them also Academy trained. So there was some uproar on the forums on how easy it is to make non-Academy units Academy trained, like the Judicators and the Temple Militants. You do need a banner upgrade. It gives you just all the benefits of Academy training, and it's 40 points, I believe, or so. But yeah, something like that. And it is a really good banner. Yet it does use up your banner slot, so that is something to keep in mind. It doesn't allow you to take any other banner anymore. So yeah, that is a bit of a downside, obviously. This list, to me, it feels a little bit more ETC-like in the sense that it doesn't crowd the field with a lot of units, but it seems to be more thought through, with every unit having its specific purpose. Whether it's better I don't know. I mean, it only has one dedicated chaff unit, being the Shadow Riders, and obviously the Legion Auxiliaries. With the March 10, they can also just march up and chaff the board. What this list does focus is a Legion Legate on a Manticore. This is there's a couple of mounts in Dread Elves, and each basically through the character design has his preferred rider. So the Legion Legate is argued to be the best rider for the Manticore, because the Legion Legate does have academy training and Manticore has Sand of Blood, so they together combine to give you +2 on your charge against wounded targets. With a Warlock Outcast with Witchcraft, you can even modify that further, and you can get up to a charge move of 12 with Swift Stride, so that is quite insane. The downside of the Legion Legate is that the only base has 3 attacks. So this guy, giving Transcendence to this guy is not that worth it on a lance, because he starts with 3 attacks, he's going to get stuck with 3 attacks, and he's never going to get any more than that. Once again, we see a Warlock Outcast and a Temple Legate to just give a decent magic phase. It is a shame to lose the Dread FG altar compared to the previous list. For the Channel 3, but on the other hand, this list, to me, it feels a bit better than the previous ones, because the previous ones they really focused on having just a lot of units, but then somewhere it's going to go wrong on the board. This is a bit of a more concentrated force. The units are a little bit more durable, if only a little bit. And the Hydra is also really great to just protect one of your flanks. The only thing that is missing in this list is any panic mitigation. So it does have a Legion Legate General who has an 18-inch bubble of Discipline 10. But then again, the reroll on the panic check, provided either by the BSB or by the Obsidian Guard, lacks in this list, which makes it a bit more of a risky play in my view. The creator of this list also gave some thoughts himself about the list on the forum. So he found that the magic items are really restrictive and really push you into certain archetype directions for the characters, which is true. And this is mostly enforced by the fact that certain characters only have access to certain weapons. So for example, only the Dread Prince has an access to the Great Weapon, and therefore only the Dread Prince can benefit from Crippling Frost, which is a 95-point magic item enchantment. And no other character can take a Great Weapon, so they cannot take the upgrade. And same as with Spear, that is only an upgrade for the Temple or for the Legion Legate. And yeah, there's a couple of other choices like that. Similarly, he sees a bit of a forced archetype in the Temple Legate. You have to buy him as a Wizard Adept. You have to basically turn him into a BSB or General because you don't have any flexibility list in terms of points. And yeah, he seems really good. He doubts that any Dark Elf list will not include one. I think he might be right there. They are really good currently, but the upgrade that they or the synergy that they provide with the unit they are in only applies if they are in a unit Temple Legate. So it does push you also towards getting Temple Militants. The Warlock Outcast I think it's a really interesting choice because he is really strong, but he is still on a Resilience 3 Wizard on foot. And yeah, 400 something points for that is quite steep. You do force players into buying a third character, because you cannot place him as a general in your unit, or you can't use him as a BSB. So yeah, I'm still a little bit on the hedge on whether to play him or not. It does make your magic phase way better, but then again, just running a Temple Legate and a Warlock Acolyte unit with a champion and a Dread altar also gives you a decent magic phase, and you can use the Temple Legate as either your general or a BSB. So that competes in my mind really strongly against this the Warlock Outcast. But then again, I'm also a player that generally plays quite light on magic. The Judicators, they are a really good pick in the army in the with regards to internal balance, because they have hatred, they have high AP, they have the highest AP in the army book, and bar from the characters, but then characters they don't really get to AP 5 normally. I think it's I agree with Willzilla here that they are a really good pick within the army book. He still continues a little bit with the bolt throwers, so they are in a strange spot, and I really do agree with him. On paper, they seem amazing, but the restrictions of the range, they really force you to advance. If you are advancing with them, you bring them up with your main battle line. If you combine the fire and the move, then you're gonna hit on 5 pluses at long range, because 12 inches, you're not gonna be at 12 inches. So 8 shots at 5s, it's only like 2 to 3 hits, and then it is not that bad even. So they are really good at chaff clearing when your opponent comes towards you with some small units, provided that you're able to adjust your battle plans such that your bolt thrower can just get a clean shot at them. Because they don't have any volley fire, they don't have any benefit of being able to shoot over your own lines. So that is something to consider. I think, I guess together with him now, that 1 or 2 bolt throwers is the way to go, and 3 bolt throwers is just too much, because you congest your battle lines just too much there. On the new Hydra design, he likes the new design because it differentiates the Hydra and the Kraken a bit more. I think the lowering of the offensive and defensive skill is fair, because offensive and defensive 5 was just quite extreme. And the breath weapon, he says it's weaker. I think it does help a bit more against knights because it's toxic attacks instead of strength 4 AP 1. So I think that is an interesting choice from the designers. And then he's a bit disappointed about the Mist Leviathan. Well, the Mist Leviathan has been through 5 different iterations during playtesting. Each iteration being shot down by the playtesters as either be really complex or just not fitting at all. And I think this is for now a bit of a placeholder also, and a choice to give people with big models that they want to put down on the field a chance of doing so. I do think the Mist Leviathan currently is interesting, and I'll show you a list that does have a Mist Leviathan, and I think is interesting. So this list has 3 Legion Legates on Manticores. It has 2 small units of Legion Auxiliaries. These are the crossbowmen. 2 big units of Obsidian Guard and Judicators, Mist Leviathan, and 2 units of Warlock Acolytes, and otherwise some chaff. What does this list do? Well, it just runs at you very fast and charges you and tries to kill you. How is this going to deploy? Well, the Obsidian Guard and the Judicators are going to be next to each other, with the Legion Auxiliaries probably on the flanks. So they are all academy trained, so they all get the benefit of it. The Legion Legates can then be either behind the infantry or even further on the flanks. And if the opponent has a lot of cannons, you can protect them using the Mist Leviathan, with the Mist Leviathan in front of the Legion Legates. Now the Mist Leviathan is going to give all of this infantry an extra 4 inch on their advance move, or the march move, I mean. So all of these units that you see here, all of the infantry is going to march 14 inches in the first turn of the game. They have academy banners, so they have an advance of 6 inch on the charge. It might just be enough to make sure you get a second turn charge, because effectively you have 20 inches plus to your 2d6 of the charge move. So that could be enough to get your second turn charge off. I also played with it with a big unit of Spear Elves, and I did find that I actually just wanted a banner of speed on these guys to just get these extra 2 inches. But the concept of having 3 Legion Legates on Manticores is really interesting, and being able to protect them with a Mist Leviathan, with just 1 Mist Leviathan for 260 points, that gives you +4 march on the infantry, and also protects your Manticores. That is really interesting. Yeah, the Legion Legates, they are built as I would build them, just minimal equipment, just go for the the basic attacks they have and don't spend any more than you need. The general and BSB are a little bit vulnerable in this way. I mean, the general could have had a basalt infusion, maybe the BSB as well, or something like that to just protect them a little bit from alchemy magic. But otherwise, I think the list is quite solid. 26 Obsidian Guard and 25 Judicators, once they just start running at you and screaming, they are going to be really, really terrifying to behold. I think this is a really good min-max list. It does feature the magic in the Warlock Acolytes. I did run double Warlock Acolytes with the magic, but the magic they offer is not that interesting because you only have, well, you have the Hereditary, and that is quite situational, but quite good once it works really well, and it works really well in combat, especially. And this list really does want to get in combat, so that's good. You have Twisted Effigy to slightly neuter the enemy magic. And the other two spells, you have Hand of Glory, which gives an Aegis save to your unit, which is also quite nice. And there was another spell that I currently forgot, to be honest. Could be Perception of Strength. That would also be a good spell. But then again, the casting costs are quite high, so likely you will only get one spell through every single phase. But then again, considering the magic investment, that is fine in this list. I don't think this list needs more magic investment than this. Maybe an Effigy of Dread could be cool in order to give the units fear, but then again, you are also gonna run away very hard from your own deployment line, so the enemy might not be tempted to come towards you, so the Effigy of Dread's aura range might just not be sufficient, and it's only for the channel 3 that you're doing this, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think it might be missing just one bolt thrower, just to give a bit more flexibility. You could chip off a couple of acolytes or Obsidian Guard Judicators to get a bolt thrower in. The question is whether you really need it, but if you're facing a wrecking team, it might be quite nice. We will continue with a bit of a strange list. So previously we saw a Highborn Elf list with a lot of citizen spear units. We can do the same with Dread Elves, where we have 10 units of 15 spears. And this list kind of works because you can field the Obsidian Guards that keep a check on your panic checks. And then the Judicators, they are for the damage output. It's definitely a special list, so I do think that the setup of the list in this way is good. The Temple Legate just provides you a little bit more magic and a channel. The Outcast is needed just to boost up all of these small units. And the amount of bodies that you're putting on the table is just preposterous for an elf army. So these units, one by one, they don't really seem that threatening, but if you factor in cosmology magic for a +1 on your strength and AP on the spears, any of these spear units suddenly become really scary with 15 attacks in the first round of combat with effectively strength 5, AP2 if they get charged. AP3 if they get charged, actually AP2 if they charge. That is really scary with Perception of Strength. The Hermit's Gambit, I believe it casts the wheel turns, so that makes you hit on a 4+, wound on a 4+, and the enemy hit you on a 4+, wound you on a 4+. It only casts the unboosted version, so I don't really know how that differs from the boosted version. But you can see that the Outcast in this case has 2 bound spells. The reason for this is that any spells cast by the Outcast are dispelled at a -2 modifier. So this also applies to bound spells, makes them really a lot more interesting to cast, especially on 3 dice, because the enemy has to dispel on a 10 instead of an 8. Having to dispel on a 10 makes you want to throw 4 dice at it against instead of 3 dice. And the Lightning Vambraces here, they give you +1 to hit. It's going to be more situational, but it is going to ensure either the Obsidian Guard to really work against models with parry, or the Judicators to work in subsequent rounds of combat. I don't know if I would go for Temple Legate with Warsmith or with Battle Oracle, it doesn't really matter in this case, I guess. Yeah, this is definitely an interesting list. I did play a game myself using this amount of units, and you you do realize that you clog up your own lines really quickly. So I think, yeah, the whole way to shut down this list is to just stand in front of it and make your opponent clog up his own moves, because suddenly if you're too close to the enemy, he cannot combo charge you anymore because of his own units getting in the way. Then again, it is really an interesting list because stuff is going to break from combat. It's going to panic through your own lines to Obsidian Guard. They keep it in check, so likely you're going to get away, and then you're going to rally at some point anyway. So it doesn't bleed too many points even. It's really an interesting list. It will definitely surprise people, and yeah, I'm really tempted to play it at a tournament once. So a similar list to this is the list that Lord Drakon is going to play. He also plays 9th Age in the Netherlands, so I already agreed with him that we are going to do a mirror match of this. This is just completely preposterous, to be honest. So previously during the old book, he already focused on the NAB spearmen. So these were the gold lists of the Dread Elves, where you had some big blocks of spearmen with Cult of Nab, so they got hatred. They had +1 to wound from the Oracle from the Cauldron, and they had a reroll of the ones to wound if you put in a Wars Battle Oracle, whatever it was called back then. So you could really bump up these spearmen to crazy levels. And now you have spearmen that have +1 to wound standard in the first round of combat. So if you count out the amount of models in this army, it's exactly 300. So they do represent the 300 Spartans of the old Greeks after the famous Battle of Thermopylae. I think it's a nice list. It's definitely not going to perform that well in tournaments. And the inclusion of magic would definitely make it better, but it is really thematic and really cool as a result. So far, the lists we have seen were lists that were focused on getting the academy interactions going also, and with a lot of Dread Legionnaires, a lot of Repeater Auxiliaries, and a lot of Obsidian Guard. This list focuses on the militant aspect of the book, the temple aspect. So as you can see, it doesn't have the Warlock Outcast anymore because it has 2 Temple Legates and a Warlock Acolytes with a champion. The Temple Legates, one of them is a Warsmith, the other is a Battle Oracle, meaning that one has Divination Magic, the other has Alchemy Magic. I think you could also go for double Divination Magic, but whether that's going to work as well is the question. I like this setup of having one Alchemy one and one Divination one. You have 2 Silent Assassins who are likely going to show up in Black Cloak units. These are really vulnerable units to put an assassin in, but then again they could also just pop up in the militants. So the militants, they do have a bit of a weakness against armor. The Silent Assassin does counter this if you include them in that, and the Warsmith also gives you a bit of a solution here. So I think that the Warsmith is going to go in the unit with the Rending Banner, the Battle Oracle in the other unit, and then you just take the hit of not being able to deal with armor with the unit with the Battle Oracle. Yeah, I think it's it's also an interesting list, that's for sure. I do like the Academy interactions a bit more, and I think there's a lot of players with me that like the aspect of having to keep in mind where your units go a bit more carefully. The Temple Militants, they are a bit dedicated units, and they are still frenzied, so it is a bit of a more risky list. Probably the 2 Militants units are going to be in the center of the board and just try to dominate there. And they will dominate against a lot of foes, but they also will lose a lot of their men. So it's really vital in this setup to bring 2 big units of militants. It's a bit of a surprise to me that here once again we see a Divine Altar Effigy of Dread. I would assume that in such a list as this, it should be better playable to get the the other version, the Crucible of Slaughter of the Divine Altar. But I think I'm with the designer of this list that the Effigy of Dread currently is just way better than the Crucible of Slaughter upgrade. But because the Crucible of Slaughter doesn't solve any of the problems that you have with this list, mostly being armor. It's interesting to see the 3 units Black Cloaks in this list. They offer a tremendous amount of shooting. I only played them in 2 units of 10, and then they were really devastating. I don't know if these small units, are a better version or a worse version. In one sense, they are better because any crippling magic missile is just gonna leave like 1 guy standing, 2 guys standing, maybe even none. Whilst if you have a unit of 10, its role is just entirely changed from a pure damage dealer to a chaff unit, basically. So that might be better. But yeah, I don't know. Also being charged is more of an issue with a unit of 6 Black Cloaks than with a unit of 10, because they still have paired weapons, so if they get charged, you first have a standard shoot, then you have, if you're 5 wide, 15 attacks, with a high offensive skill, lightning reflexes, and a +1 to wound. So if you field a full unit, they are not that easy to get rid of, unless you, of course, have a lot of armor on your model. The Mist Leviathan here is included, I guess, to just push up the militants a bit further. And yeah, one small thing in this list, it does focus, it does feature 12 Obsidian Guard. I think in this list you could easily get away with just replacing them with Judicators, because the list struggles a bit more with armor than with just rank and file model removal. And you don't really need to reroll of the panic within 8 inches if your units are all fearless. So the next list is a little bit of a weirder one for me, just because all of the previous lists, they dedicated mostly on combat and at shooting support. This list doesn't really have that big of a combat threat, except for the Warlock Acolytes, and probably the Dread Prince on the Elven Horse, and the Legion Legate on the Elven Horse. They are all gonna join the Warlock Acolytes, giving the Warlock Acolytes magic resistance 4 with the double Aether icon and the Obsidian Rock on the BSB. Yet still, this is a unit that can be crippled very easily by shooting. You only have 12 bodies in there, and in the end, if your unit is gonna end up being a Dread Prince and a Legion Legate that you pay 800 points for, 900 points for, even nearly, I don't think it's a good call. The unit of Warlock Acolytes obviously has light troops and can zip around on the battlefield really quickly. So yeah, that is good, but it is a bit of a Death Star, and if it doesn't work out, it really doesn't work out. The magic here, you have Witchcraft. Witchcraft doesn't support Acolytes that well because they really want to get some buffs on themselves. So that is a bit of a weird lore choice. So the Acolytes probably are going to go for Hand of Glory, and I thought they could get Perception of Strength, so probably Perception of Strength to just be able to buff themselves to get up to the 3-up Aegis that they want to get at. Likely your opponent is going to dispel one of these, so they'll run around with a 4-up Aegis with Strength 5 with +1 to win the first round of combat, but with AP 1. So they are going to have a bit of an issue with AP, and yeah, the characters say the Dread Prince with the Great Weapon definitely helps, but the Legion Legate doesn't really help at all. So I'd rather have seen a Shield Breaker on this guy. But then, yeah, I don't really think this list is going to work. Currently, the Warlock Acolytes are a really good pick, because their stats are just insane if you get some magic off of them. But I would assume that you would just want to run 2 units of 12 Warlock Acolytes and a Cosmo Warlock Outcast Wizard Master, and no champions on the Warlock Acolytes at all. That seems to be the better pick to me. But then again, I have not played against this list, so maybe it works way better than I would anticipate. The Legion Auxiliaries here are just for the combat, for the damage output on their crossbows, because the Academy trained interactions, you only have 1 unit that wants to charge that has Academy trained. So the suppressing volley, I never managed to pull it off in my playtesting games, even though I've played full academy units. You're not going to pull it off in this list, probably. So I would rather have different units rather than Legion Auxiliaries in this list. Preferably, possibly even the Shadow Raiders, the horse-mounted option, just because then your list becomes suddenly really fluid, and then yeah, it's going to be more of an avoidance list. They try to rule out the possibility of playing avoidance, but this can get pretty close. The Raptor Chariots, they still have some nice lateral movement of 7 inches, which really is way better than any of the infantry have. The Krakens, they have a lot of mobility. And obviously the characters in the Acolytes as well. The final list in this video is a list that I played myself. It was supposed to be a bit of a more fluffy list, just demonstrating all of the different interactions within the new Dread Elf books, whilst still being kind of fun to play. So yeah, it turned out to be a bit stronger than I anticipated, I think. There's still some modifications that I would make in order to make it a bit better for tournaments. But I think the basis is really cool also. So it does feature a block of 40 Dread Legionnaires that you want to push all over the field as quickly as possible. And that's why you have the Mist Leviathan. So you have a banner of speed, so the first turn you can move 16 inches with this unit, and the next turn you have an advance of 7. So that combined gives you 23 inches, and then after that you have the 2d6 of the charge. So your opponent really has to deploy backwards in order to prevent the charge of the Dread Legionnaires. And that is quite scary probably for your opponent. You have a Silent Assassin that can beef up the Dread Legionnaires. You have a Dread Prince that of course goes in with Crippling Frost and a Potion of Swiftness to really definitely make sure that he strikes first in any challenge or any duel against any characters that might be really scary to your unit. Of course, if your opponent has a champion in any of his units and he charges in with a champion and a character, it's going to be a bit of a pickle for you. But then again, you can use your character placement to also influence where your opponent's character can go, because, well, even out of a duel, a Dread Prince with a great weapon with 5 strength, 7 attacks with +1 to wound in the first round of combat is kind of crippling to a lot of characters. Also, characters that load up on items, they are forced with having to deal with the Ring of the Obsidian Throne, which will give them -3 offensive and defensive. So likely the Dread Legionnaires only on 4s, but it's quite certain that they will hit the Dread Prince on 4s. Maybe even the Silent Assassin only on 5s, and that's for characters. So that's good. That's one of the main things of the list. It's also a bit of a Death Star, to be honest. But it's a Death Star that can get whittled down over time, because they still are just Resilience 3, 5 of armor elves. You do need 40 guys in this unit. One of the games that I played 2 games with this, one of the games after 3 rounds, all of the Legionnaires were gone. But then again, you still have the rest of the army that comes afterwards. The unit of Temple Militants feels a bit out of place in this army, because the Wizard Outcast is going to go in the raiding party to just have a mage bunker, and the 345 points that we spend on the Temple Militants, they can probably be better spent elsewhere, because the Temple Militants, they only really shine with the Temple Legate, or just in units of 15 on the flank. I think they are quite valuable with Fearless, though the Frenzy will play against them from time to time when you're playing on the flank. I do feature 2 units of Obsidian Guard. This could have been 1 unit, because I don't have that many units on the table. Or we could beef up one of the units. You could combine them and get 1 bigger unit. That might also be interesting, because then you have, next to the Dread Legionnaires, another unit you can just push up on the board. Warlock Acolytes with the champion, they support the Wizard Outcasts. I played the Wizard Outcast with Occultism just to have a bit of a grasp for it. on a mage that doesn't want to be near the front lines himself, basically, and it really didn't work out. So I was in these stats games happy with the champion on the Warlock Acolyte. I don't think it's needed though. I think it's way better with a Wizard Outcast on Witchcraft, with 2 Binding Scrolls without Destiny Scroll. And you just have to try to protect him and keep him away from combat. The Dread Knights are great for zoning, the Repeater Battery is great for chaff clearing, and the Missile Leviathan is quite essential in this list. So changes I would, yeah, you could polarize the list more. So getting rid of the Destiny's Call, possibly exchange, yeah, you want to exchange the Temple Militants for something else, but I'm not really sure what. You could put in a small unit of Dread Legionnaires. I think that might be the best choice. You could also go for, yeah, maybe just a bit of a bigger unit of Legion Auxiliaries that can support the Legionnaires quite well. And if you take a big unit, it suddenly becomes a potent combat unit also. And you can fool around a little bit with your assassin, deploying him in the auxiliaries, and then you can have some fun with that. So I would merge the 2 Obsidian Guard units. The Black Cloaks are amazing as they are. Remove the champion of the Warlock Acolytes, because I think a Wizard Outcast on Witchcraft just already does the job. I might give the Wizard Outcast a bounce spell, either the Lightning Rod to just be a little bit better at chaff clearing, or the Dread Elf specific bounce spell. But all in all, it's a really cool list, and it works also quite well. So it works better than I expected. So the Dread Prince, the reason I took a Dread Prince is because I wanted to try out Crippling Frost, and Crippling Frost is really crippling in duels, and otherwise it's just, yeah, it's any hits that you do become wounds, and it's really painful for the opponent. The only thing that's missing is divine attacks, but even if you got divine attacks, then it would be insane. So in that sense, I think a Wizard Outcast on Cosmology would also, no, it's Divination. With Stars Line would also be nice to get divine attacks and rerolls to hit, but then you need a Temple Legate. And in this list, I'd rather have a Wizard Outcast than the Temple Legate, even though you could go down the route of having a Temple Legate. Getting rid of the raiding party, beefing up the Temple Militants, and focusing on the Divination. So there's also a lot of different options, as always. I think in its current iteration, it's a really cool list to test out some interactions in the Dread Elves. It can be a really potent list if you know what you're doing. And yeah, well, let's just leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you the next time.